Hello and welcome to Enchantment of Eternity's review for Profit and Loss, which is episode 18 of season 2 of Star Trek Deep Space Nine. This video is a part of a series of videos where I review episodes of Star Trek Deep Space Nine, one episode at a time. In this video, I cover the second season episode, Profit and Loss. So Profit and Loss is the episode in which an old flame of Quark comes on board the station, a Cardassian woman who is in league with two students who are apparently revolutionaries who are trying to free Cardassia of military rule, and the Cardassian Empire is none too happy about this, so they want these two students so that they can execute them. And when Garek spots them on the station, he warns the Cardassians that they're there. However, the Cardassians dare not violate a Bajoran sovereignty, and so they try to strike a deal with the Bajorans to get them back. Meanwhile, Quark is trying desperately to woo his former lover, who seems to want nothing to do with her, nothing to do with him, but until he reveals that he has a cloaking device that could get them away from the station without any hassle. Without being caught by the Cardassians, and he offers to give it to the two students on the condition that Natima Lang stay behind with him. And so she resorts to shooting Quark to try to get the cloaking device, but after she does so, she realizes that she is still very much in love with him, and so agrees to stay with him on the station if the students leave. And so when the students go to depart, Garek, unfortunately, is waiting for them with orders to kill them all by this Cardassian Gull who Garek doesn't seem to like. And when Garek takes a bit too long executing them, the Gull shows up and tells Garek he knew that he was weak and soft and that he's going to execute them themselves, and Garek will never get out of exile. So Garek decides to kill this Gull instead, and then he lets the Cardassian dissidents leave. However, Natima Lang decides that she does need to go with them instead, and so says goodbye to Quark when Quark and Garek walk off together, and it could be the beginning of a beautiful friendship. So, the major thing that I've been hearing about this episode throughout the years, well, maybe not that many years, it's maybe like 8 or 10 years, it's within the past decade, I was told that this episode is modeled very closely off of Casablanca. One reviewer that I watched one of their videos, in fact, said that it was practically a shot-by-shot remake of Casablanca, and apparently the writers originally had this episode titled "Here's Looking at You," but then decided that that's way too close and they didn't want to get sued, and so they changed the name of the title. But apparently it's still very, very heavily influenced from Casablanca. Now, to this point, I have never seen Casablanca, and so when I covered this episode previously, like in my season by review, I wasn't able to give my opinion on exactly how close this episode resembled Casablanca because I had never seen the movie. The movie's, I think at this stage, 82 years old. Is considered by many to be one of the greatest movies ever made, but I've never seen it. And and I talked about this on my channel before, I don't really particularly care for classic movies. They all have a particular style, like, it's hard to put into words, but they're all, I'm talking really fast and I'm talking fast. Like, they all have, like, archetypal characters, and they all kind of blend together. Now, of course, not every movie from that era is exactly the same, but there were a lot less movies being made back then, and so there wasn't as much variety. I think that's an understatement. That there wasn't as much variety. And plus they all have that classical style, which I just personally never really cared for. I just never really cared for movies that came out before I was born. I mean, there's some movies in the late 60s, early 70s that they're okay. But when you get back to like 50s and 40s, that's when you totally lose me. If someone once told me I was pretentious because I had this opinion, I was like, well, there's a certain style that these movies have. I don't care for that style. So if you want to call that pretentious, you go right ahead. But I don't think it is. But anyway, so there's only a few classical movies I've seen that everyone said, oh, these are really, really great movies and they're classics and you got to see them as some of the best movies ever made. Citizen Kane. I watched that and I thought it was boring as fuck. I mean, it wasn't a bad movie, but I didn't find it particularly good. I mean, and to be fair, part of why I found it so boring is because there's been so many movies that came after that sort of improved on the whole biopic model and did a better job. So, there's, hindsight and all that. And then there's Gone with the Wind, which I could not get through. I think I got like 20 minutes through and I was like, this movie is boring as fuck. So, and there's a few other like classical movies that I thought were okay. Like there was the Treasure of the Sierra Madrid or whatever. That was all right. High Noon. That was more of the 60s. That was a little boring, but it was okay. So, I thought for this review, I should watch Casablanca. I mean, it's only been 80 years. So it's like almost, not quite, but almost twice as old as I am. So, and, people have been saying it's one of the best movies ever made. And I think it's about high time that I watch it. So yesterday, I watched it. So unlike the other times I talked about this episode, this time I will be able to compare it to Casablanca. Now, one of the things I was looking for in particular when I was watching Casablanca, because I was thinking about this episode, and one of the things I wanted to find out is, because everyone's talking about how this is practically a shot-by-shot remake of it, I wanted to find out if this episode resembled Casablanca just as much, more or less, than the 7th season Deep Space Nine episode, The Siege of 558, resembles Saving Private Ryan. Now, that's a whole other thing. If you're unfamiliar with my channel, you probably haven't heard of that. This is something I've been saying on my channel since the inception of my channel 10 years ago, is that that episode in season 7 of DS9 really, 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 really copied off of Saving Private Ryan. Now, when I said that, I got tons and tons of pushback, and in fact, I've never heard anyone else other than me say that. I mean, I've heard some vague comparisons. Some people, it's kind of like Saving Private Ryan, or it's kind of like they name other war movies. Like, no. It's Saving Private Ryan. And and the behind the scenes stuff, Irish Team Bear and the people who wrote that episode were like, oh yeah, we watched these classical movies from the 40s and 50s. We based it off of that. I mean, not doubting that you did watch classical movies, because you're obviously very, influenced by classical movies. But you watched Saving Private Ryan and wrote that episode and based it off of that. Just admit it. Like, I'm kind of pissed off that no one will admit it. Now, I'm not going to get in too much detail about that episode, because I'm talking about this episode in this video. If you want more detail, you can watch my review of The Siege of 558. I've already have it up on my channel. In that review, I did a little section where I did a comparison side by side. So I described the plot of that episode and Saving Private Ryan at the same time. So in other words, things that happen in both that episode and the movie. And I was able to get very specific. I mean, talk about a shot-by-shot remake. Like, I was able to, like, go for a long time. Now, why some people get confused and be like, oh, it's nothing like Saving Private Ryan. They think I'm talking about the whole movie. They think I'm talking about, the Battle at D-Day and them encountering, like, a young girl or all that stuff. No, I'm just talking about the ending portion of the movie, not the entire movie. The ending portion where Tom Hanks and his group find Private Ryan, which is Matt Damon, and they're at this bridge that they're trying to protect from the Germans, and the troops that they're with, that Matt Damon is with, are tired, exhausted, and Tom Hanks is just there to take Matt Damon away. But they're like, no, he decides to stay and protect the bridge and try to help them, even though they're vastly outnumbered by the Germans. Now, if you've seen the episode Siege of 558, you would realize I'm also, that way I described that portion of the movie is also describing that episode. Just substitute Cisco and substitute Germans for Djimidar and substitute, there's no there's no Private Ryan in the Siege of 5 so that's the one difference. But everything else, like a hopeless battle, and the Cisco and his team come to help, but they decide to stay, even though they're vastly outnumbered. It's the exact same goddamn story, beat for beat. And if you want to argue with me, just watch my other review. Watch what I say about it. Because if you try to argue with me in this video, I'm just going to post a link to the other video. Because I don't have time to get into any more detail. But in that review, as I say, I go shot by shot by shot and break it down. All the similarities. And it's ridiculous how close the two of them are. So, anyway, so the question I wanted answered was, because people have said, like that one guy said, it's practically a shot-by-shot remake of Casablanca. So I want to know, does this episode resemble Casablanca more, less, or around the same of Siege of 558 resembles Saving Private Ryan? And my determination, which I know some people may disagree, and again, if you do watch my review, my determination is that less. This doesn't resemble Casablanca nearly as much as Siege of 558. It resembles Saving Private Ryan. I'm sorry, but it doesn't. I mean, I think the people who called it a shot-by-shot remake were exaggerating. In fact, I was actually surprised how little this episode resembled Casablanca as I was watching Casablanca. Like, there's definitely some resemblance. The whole thing about them being in neutral ground and in enemy forces, and they want to arrest a person, or in this case it's persons, but same difference. And there's a bartender who's in love with someone associated with the person that the enemies want, but they don't necessarily want them, they just want their associates. And the bartender has the means to get them away. And then it ends with someone who was supposed to be on the other side actually turning and deciding to be on the bartender's side, and they go off happy. Now, that's where the similarities end, I think I just described all the similarities. There's some... It was not a shot-by-shot remake. For one thing, there was a scene in Casablanca that was kind of similar to the scene in this episode where I can't remember the character's name now, but the lady, she pulled a gun on Rick, who's Humphrey Bogart's character, for those who haven't seen it or haven't seen it in years. she pulls a gun on Rick, and in that scene, I was expecting, because I was told this was a shot-by-shot remake, and after having seen Profit and Loss, where Natima pulls a phaser on Quark and shoots him by accident, I was expecting her to shoot Humphrey Bogart by accident, but that doesn't happen. In fact, she does give up, and after pulling the gun, they do say there, and I actually do love you. But of course, when it happens in Casablanca, it actually makes sense for their character. Which it doesn't for DS9, but I'll get more on that later. But yeah, what happens next is very, very different. First of all, the person who's wanted by the authorities in Casablanca is her husband, which completely changes the dynamic from DS9, where the Tima Lang is not with a husband; she's with two younger students. But for me, and there's all these other all the other tiny little details, like none of them match up this episode. So, but to me, the biggest difference, the main reason why I say Siege is much, not The Siege, but 558, you know what I'm talking about. That's much closer to Saving Private Ryan than this episode is to Casablanca, is because the major difference is Quark's character as opposed to Humphrey Bogart's character. Because Quark is the whole entire time desperately in love and wanting to get Natima back, and as soon as the episode starts, like as soon as he sees her, he's like, "Oh, I love you," and she like throws a drink in his face, and so throughout most of the episode is Quark saying, "I love you, come with me, I love you," and Natima is saying, "No, fuck you, fuck off, don't like you, fuck off," and then we get maybe a little bit past the halfway mark, like maybe 3/4, and she's all of a sudden flips on a dime to fuck off to, "Oh, you're right, I love you too, I've been holding it back, I love you too." And then there's like, "Oh, I love each other," and they love each other, and she's like, "Okay, I'll stay with you." And then when they go to leave, she again flips on a dime. Now, actually, I decided to go. Sorry. I know I just told you I was going to stay, but, just no reason. I just decided that I don't really want to stay with you anyway, so bye. Which, in Casablanca, Humphrey Bogart's character is not desperately going, "I love you, I love you, I love you." In fact, he's kind of pissed off. His heart was broken by her. He didn't want to see her again, and he's like very upset. And when she tries to be nice to him and be kind to him, he doesn't really want anything to do with her. And then she shows up when he's drunk, and he says something like mean, pisses her off. And then the next time he sees her again, he tries to apologize and wants to know why she abandoned him in the past. But she's like, "No, you were being a dick, so I'm not going to tell you." And then later, she finds out that he has the papers, the things that she needs to escape, her and her husband to escape. And so that's when she confronts him again. And, they have the confrontation with the gun. And then she explains that she thought when she had her little romance with Rick, she thought her husband was dead. And so that's why she had a fling with him. But the reason why she didn't show up and abandon him was because she found out her husband was still alive. And so that sort of explained it. But then she says that, it's a really complex, very interesting dynamic. She finds out that, she's actually still in love with Rick's character and says, "Okay, I'm fighting it, but I should, I do want to stay with you." And they agree to stay. But then Rick realizes that she would never be happy with him. Like, she may think she wants to stay with him now, but if she leaves her husband, she'll regret it. And so he tricks her and like tells, and when it looked like she was gonna send just her husband away, she sent them both away, and she told her husband, "Oh, she told me that she doesn't really love me anymore and whatnot," and did it for her so she could be happy. Very powerful. Not at all what happens in this episode. There's just totally different thing. And if I was to make it clear, I actually really liked Casablanca, which again, it might not sound like a revolutionary thing to say I like a movie that's considered one of the greatest movies ever made. Oh my god, I'm being so revolutionary. Stop it with your weird opinions. But no, it's strange for me because, as I said, I don't really like classic movies that much. Like, Citizen Kane is considered one of the best movies ever made, and I thought it was boring as fuck. I couldn't even get through Gone with the Wind, and I can't think of any. So it's actually out of place for me to actually really, really like, and it allows me to look past all those cheesy things about classical movies that I hate, like the typical, the way that men talk is all very stereotypical and shit, and you know, it's hard to put into words, but I was able to look past that, because this was actually a really good movie. And so, here's the ironic thing, though. Now, it's not... Hold on. Before I get to the ironic thing, let me just say a statement that is not going to be controversial. It's going to be a duh, come on, Mark, statement. And that is that this episode's nowhere near as good as Casablanca. And again, but I still feel like it's worth saying. But let me get to the ironic thing, the irony here. Is that this episode would have been better if it was more like Casablanca. If they actually made it. If they copied more. If all these other people, what people were saying, it was practically a shot-by-shot remake. If that was true, this episode would be better. Now, in one part in particular, like, it doesn't have to be a shot-by-shot. It doesn't have to be exactly like Casablanca. But there's one element that is different in this episode that actually would have made a lot more sense if they made it more like Casablanca. And that is Quark's character. As I said, in this episode, he's like, I love you, I love you, I love you. But if he was actually more like Rick is in Casablanca. Like, when I've heard Armin Shimon talk about it, he's like, oh, I read the script and I see this character like Rick from Casablanca, and that's how I played him. But actually, that's not how he's written. Because, ironically, if Quark was written more like Rick from Casablanca, then Quark would have been more in character with Quark. Because they did this thing where he's like overly over and in love and head over heels and like, oh, I love you so much. I would sacrifice, and he spends the whole episode like trying his fucking damnedest to woo her. Is completely out of character for Quark, and it's nothing like the character of Rick from Casablanca. The character of Rick from Casablanca was jaded. He was upset. He was like, when she showed up, he was like heartbroken. He was like, no, fuck off. He was very apathetic and didn't like have any allegiance and didn't really give a shit about anyone. And if they made Quark more like that, that would actually be more in character for him. If they had What's-Her-Face show up, instead of him just being constantly, oh, I love you, and her being fuck off, if they did a similar dynamic that Casablanca had with Rick and What's-Her-Face, Elsa? Yeah, Elsa was her name. Then that actually would have been more in character for Quark. Ironic. I think that's really ironic. Because they could have done a similar thing. Because it would be totally in character for Quark to be jaded and be like, you're not my problem. So if she shows up and she tries to, play nice and be, whatever, they had a similar dynamic and Quark pushes her away and then she gets pissed off, and then he kind of regrets it and goes to her and says, oh, tell me about this. And she's like, no, fuck off, and pushes him away. And then Then she finds out he has the cloaking device, and then goes up to him and he's like, "No, fuck you. You don't get the goddamn cloaking device. Go to hell." And then she convinces him, "No, this is why," and comes up with a really good reason. Maybe it doesn't have to be a husband. They don't have to copy Casablanca that strictly, but some really revolutionary good reason as to why she left him. And then he changes his mind, but. And now the part of him sending her away, that would be out of character for Quark. So that aspect of it wouldn't work. So maybe you could change the ending a bit and make it something more like this. But the aspect of Quark being jaded and being like, "No, fuck you," and their relationship being complicated, ironically, would have worked better for Deep Space Nine. It would have worked better for the character of Quark. It would have been more in character for Quark, and I find that a really rich irony. Because as is, this episode's totally out of character for Quark. He's completely out of character. Some people pointing out, like, the fact that he is being kind of, slimy about the cloaking device, and the fact that he, she's scared. The reason why she broke up with him is because he did some, sleazy thing or whatever, and he's like, "Hey, I'm a Ferengi still." And so people try to be like, "No, look at that, he's still in character." No. And I've heard other people say the reason why Quark is out of character because he's too much like a hero, and I think that's what Ira Steven Behr himself said, that he thought that this episode didn't work because Quark was too much like a hero. And I actually disagree with that. I don't think he's too much like a hero. That's not the problem. That's not why he's out of character. You can make him a hero. Sure, and I agree with the people who say, but no, Quark can be a hero in his own Ferengi way. Totally. 100%. That's not why he's out of character. Why he's out of character is the whole, "I love you, I love you, I love you, I love you. Come on, be with me. Oh, I love you. I'll give up at my bar for you. I love you. Ron will throw it into the ground, but I don't care, just so I'll be with you." That is 100% out of character for Quark. 100% out of character to be that way. And I don't give me this shit like, "Oh, we've seen him like flirt with Dax, therefore I can buy that he'd be in a romantic like that." Bullshit. That is totally not the same thing at all. What we've seen of Ferengi, that they made very clear in the first couple of seasons of DS9, everything we know about from TNG, is that they're misogynists, don't give a fuck about women. They treat them like shit, force them to stay home and not wear clothes. And need I remind you of the episode Rules of Acquisition, that just happened a few episodes ago, where he was in love with Pell, clearly, but still treated her like shit because she was defying Ferengi customs, and he felt like she didn't, she was just a female. Now, I guess the argument that one could make of why this episode's different, or why this romance is different, is because it's not another Ferengi, it's an off-worlder. And let's say I grant you that, because perhaps the Ferengi, they are obviously a very fucked up culture. So perhaps in their culture, it's perfectly fine for Ferengi to have relationship with clothed females as long as they're from an alien race, which to me seems very contradictory. Seems, especially the way the Ferengi have been treated, is very misogynistic and xenophobic. It seems like they would frown upon Ferengi having a relationship with different aliens. That would seem to be more in character for them. But to be fair, it was never specifically mentioned in the show, so maybe their culture is just hypocritical, which totally possible because many cultures are. Many cultures do have hypocritical cultural norms, so maybe they're just a bunch of fucking hypocrites where they treat their own women like shit, but think it's perfectly okay to treat a different woman from a different alien race as an equal. Let's say that's the case. Even so, I don't buy that Quark would go as far to be like, oh, fuck the bar, I don't care about it as long as I can be with you. Completely out of character. 1000% out of character. That goes against every single thing that has been established since then. Just because he had a little fling or a little crush, childhood crush, and flirts hard out like a misogynist with Jadzia doesn't mean that he would fucking act like this. Not in the slightest bit. And because he had a little crush on Pell, but still told her to fuck off because she was wearing clothes, also doesn't imply he would act like this, not one fucking bit. So I am sorry. Quark is 1000% out of character in this episode, and that is the main reason I don't buy it. On top of that, the two of them, as I said, unlike Casablanca, they did a terrible job emulating that if that was their goal. Because Casablanca was a great romance for the ages that was so powerful and worked, and the two of them had so much chemistry, and the dynamic was so well written. Here, no chemistry. The dynamic is terribly written. It's like, as I said, it's like the whole time she's like, fuck off, fuck off, fuck off, and then boom, flips on a dime. Oh, I love you, I love you, I love you. And then boom, oh yeah, by the way, I'll leave anyway. I'm not staying with you. There's no rhyme or reason for it. And it's just such clunky, bad writing. And here's the other thing. If we're getting to the other aspects of this episode, Garek is also out of character. And Odo is also a little bit out of character. So Quark isn't the only one out of character. Now, it seems like they just wanted to do a Casablanca story and they didn't give a shit about how everyone was out of character. But as I said, ironically, Quark would actually be in a character if they actually made it more like Casablanca. But that's a deep irony, I think. But Garek, to be fair, I believe at this stage only appeared in 2 episodes. So he's more out of character with his future self. Which you might be like, well, that's unfair to judge this episode that based off stuff that hasn't even come out yet. But here's the thing. If you look back in the pantheon of Garek episodes, this one sticks out as a sore thumb. It's out of place. The other ones that came before this are fine. They slot into his character story perfectly well. This one, I mean, it's not too bad, and I can definitely see some people disagreeing with me about this. But for one thing, Garek, and again, seems they did it because they wanted the Casablanca story, because the ending is very similar to Casablanca, where Garek takes on the role of your local police chief, I can't remember his name, from Casablanca, who was supposed to be supporting the bad guys, but then at the end flips. And so they obviously just wanted to do that. But it doesn't actually make sense, because because the goal terrain, I think his name is, he shows up and Garek is like, he wasn't a goal before. He's like, so they made you a goal? They must be desperate or something. And they're bantering with each other and they obviously hate each other. And Terrain's like, look, if you kill these people, I will, end your exile. And then when he shows up, Garek's like, yeah, what the fuck are you doing? You just go away so I can finish this and kill them. And the guy's like, I can't believe you weren't considered clever. You're stupid enough to think that your exile will end. And he's like, no, I suppose not. And the other Cardassian guy was like, well, yeah, but yeah, you stupid fucking Taylor, fuck you, I'll kill them and get all the credit. So I have several issues with this. First of all, Garek absolutely should have realized that this never would have ended his exile, and he was being stupid, which is out of character for him. Especially how clever that he's been portrayed in the future. But even up to this point, he's still portrayed as very clever, and this is 100% out of character for him. It also doesn't jive with future episodes of Garek, how he was kind of working with the Cardassians. Like, when he spotted Natima, he immediately called them like he's still in contact. Now, to be fair, he did kind of do that in past prologue as well. But in future episodes, he doesn't at all. He's considered an outcast. Like, they're like, fuck you, Garek. You're outcast. You can't contact us at all. We don't want to hear from you. So that part doesn't jive with future episodes. But the fact that he was dumb enough to think that this would end his exile is 100% out of character for him. Now, I watched a review where someone tried to headcanon and justify this and be like, no, what happened, you see, is that Garek actually did see through him, and so he knew the guy was going to show up, and he was just waiting there to kill him. But there's nothing in the episode that indicates that. Like, when the Terran shows up, Garek looks genuinely surprised. Now, I know you could headcanon and be, oh no, he was just pretending to be surprised. No, I think that's bullshit. I think you're just desperately trying to justify bad writing and trying to make excuses for bad writing, if that's the case. Clearly, that's not what they intended when they wrote this episode. Clearly, they intended that Garek fall for it because that's what they wanted to do to slot comfortably in their Casablanca analogy, even though it makes no sense for Garek's character. And so, in fact, like, the second phaser that he has to kill the goal. I heard someone say, oh, that's why he had that second phaser there, because he knew he was going to show up. No, he took that phaser from Quark. He didn't bring that with him. He just happened to have it. Now, granted, he did have the good sense to hide it, so the goal didn't see it, and so he could, spring it and kill him with it. But that doesn't mean that he planned for it all along. That was just improvising. So, yeah, and the whole thing with that goal was really dumb. That goal just seemed like an idiot, and it didn't seem like the kind of shit that Garek would be involved with the Obsidian Order. But of course, the Obsidian Order does not exist yet. A few episodes from now it will. And, well, I mean, canon it exists, but in actual writing, they hadn't come up with the idea of it yet. So that's why it doesn't fit. It just doesn't fit. I'm sorry. If I look back in the pantheon of Garek's appearances, DS9, this one sticks out as a sore thumb. And the whole bullshit with him being like, oh, I love Cardassia and whatever. And it's like, anyway. Now with Odo, the one thing, I don't think Odo was terribly out of character, but I did find that one scene where he just lets Natima go after Quark's begging for her. That doesn't seem to fit. Now, granted, he does try to excuse it by saying, I'm doing it for justice, but why didn't he face any consequences? He just, disobeyed direct orders from the Bajoran government whom he works for. Why didn't he receive any repercussions? Why didn't Garek receive any repercussions for killing that goal on the station? Or you're trying to tell me that Sisko didn't find out about that? Or maybe he just turned a blind eye to it, I guess? I don't know. But I think the whole thing with Odo saying, oh, I'll let them go, but I'll do it for justice, was out of character. I don't buy that he would disobey direct orders from Sisko and the Bajoran government he works for like that. Now, some people might be like, oh, but Odo always does his own thing. He makes his own rules. And yeah, sure, but he's never just let prisoners go when he was told not to. Like, that is definitely like a bridge too far. You never did anything like that. And I might be able to buy it if he had a better reason. But here, saying, I'll do it for justice, like, What does that mean? Like, that's not a good enough reason. Now, granted, I know Odo's been established to care about justice, but still not to the extent where he just let prisoners go because he disagrees with the charges that they're given. Like, I don't know. And especially, and some people might try to say, oh, but he actually does have a friendship with Quark. Because that's one of the cards that Quark plays, is like, but you and I, don't deny it, we're friends. And that is an interesting thing that they bring that up. But, and Odo does deny it. He's like, I'm not doing it for you. But some people might say, oh, he just won't admit it. He just doesn't want to admit it to Quark, but he really is doing it for him. I'm sorry. I don't think he would let prisoners go for that. And why didn't he face any consequences for that? It's actually the bigger question that I have, really. But as much as those things bother me, this scene actually, this episode actually does have a couple of really good scenes. The scene where Quark goes to Garek in Garek's shop was a fucking beautiful scene. That was such a good scene. I love the way that they doubled speaking about around each other. The way Garek is like, oh, do you like this dress? Oh, I think your lady friend would appreciate it. For me, it's not for my taste. I find it too radical. But your friend seems like she's into radical. Like, just the way he's talking. And sort of the sort of back and forth that Garek and Quark have. And at the end of the scene, like, Garek rips up the dress to sort of make a point that her life is in danger. And Quark's just like, actually, I will buy that dress. See that it's amended. It's kind of like a power move. Like, I fucking love that. Like, that was a great sort of character dynamic between Quark and Garek. And also, the scene I was just complaining about, I actually also really loved. Even though I do think Odo is a little bit out of character for saying, I'll do it for justice. I actually think that's a really good scene where Quark goes in and begs Odo, and he's trying to come up with any reason, and eventually he's like on his knees going, pretty! And Odo was like reading a novel. That's like, will be a running thing. I'll always be reading cop novels for the rest of the show. But I love how Odo's like, I'm busy, but he was just reading a novel. That was a good scene too, I will admit. And also the scene where Garek shows up in Ops, and is like, in the Cardassian ship is like, had their weapons loaded and ready and armed, locked on the station. And as soon as it happens, like, Garek shows up as like, Commander, I think we should talk. Now again, it's out of character for him to be speaking for the Cardassian Union, but it was a really good scene. And then when Garek actually spoke to Cisco, like, and the way, again, the double speak he was speaking around it, that was a good scene too. But, so ultimately, what I'll say about this episode is that it is a bad episode with a couple of good scenes. It's, the main plot is just weak. They're just trying to be like Casablanca and failing and not doing a good job at it. And Quark is 100% out of character. He has no chemistry with the guest character. Like, this is another thing with Casablanca. Like, they don't, like, we get almost instantly, like, the gravitas, the connection between the two love interests, like, as soon as we meet her. But with this episode, it just feels jarring. It just, you don't buy her backstory, and we're just told in dialogue, oh yes, this honey landed, paint your face with honey and a butterfly landed on your nose. Like, that was so cheesy. Like, you didn't buy it at all. But the one last thing I will say about Casablanca, which I know this review is supposed to be about profit and loss, but I will say there were so many quotes from that I've heard throughout my whole life, and so many references that I've seen in other shows. Like, I actually feel like the Voyager episode, The Killing Game, to me that was definitely based off of Casablanca, and to me that was almost seemed more like Casablanca than this episode did. Now, not in terms of plot. In terms of plot, it wasn't. But the character that Janeway was playing in the holodeck, she was way more like Rick. And the whole establishment thing was just like his establishment. So that whole situation, that seemed to resemble Casablanca more than this episode, in my humble opinion. And then, of course, there's tons of other references. Obviously, the whole spiel that Humphrey Bogart says at the end of the movie, it's not worth a hill of beans to get on that plane, don't look back. Rom repeats this almost verbatim in the episode Call to Arms when he tells Lita to leave. And I knew that, even though I hadn't seen Casablanca. I was familiar enough with that line to know that he was pretty much quoting Casablanca even when I first saw that episode. So it's not news to me, but that did come to mind when I was watching that episode. What is news to me is that line, it looks like it's the beginning of a beautiful friendship. Like, I had no idea that was from Casablanca. I heard that line so many times throughout my entire life. And the whole thing with the character of Sam, which I've seen tons of spoofs, like Naked Gun had a spoof on that, and there's several other movies and shows had spoofs on that I knew was from this movie. Like, there's an episode at the start of Season 7, or the Season 7 premiere, after Jadzia died, and Worf is, like, forcing Vic Fontaine to sing a song that reminds him of Jadzia, and Vic is like, no, I don't really want to sing it. How about something else? And Worf eventually yells, sing! Like, that was actually taken from this, from Casablanca as well, because there was a scene where Rick was forcing Sam to play that song that reminded him of Elsa, and he was like, oh no, I don't want to play that song, how about this? And he's like, no, play it, damn it. So yeah, that's another thing that they were taking from it. Plus, I never realized that the saying "We'll always have Paris" was from this episode, or this movie, sorry. And so the episode of TNG with that title, I knew that title was a reference to something, but I had no idea it was a reference to this movie. But yeah, it's just interesting learning these things. Yeah, a lot of other little lines and things. It's like so many other like plot points I've seen like in other movies, emulated or parodied or whatnot. So yeah, that movie had so much effect on pop culture. But anyway, it is way better than this episode. So I would like to now thank my Patreon supporters for supporting me on Patreon. It's very much appreciated. It does help me continue with my channel. I would like to give a big special thanks to Brandon Neilhouse, Jordan Johnson, and Antarius. Thank you so very, very much for your strong support. I'd also like to give a shout out to Benjamin Mead, Greg Marley, Francisco, Chuck Hooks, Kyrie091, Anthony D. Benedictus, Ricky Manijester, Joel Lavals, Alessandro Migalisio, Norman Buchwald, Stephen Kennedy, Britton Berg, and Allison Fordyce. Thank you all so very, very much for your support. So we have a few comments on this episode. First comment. Oh, let me get to the right episode. That would help. I was over on Playing God. This episode isn't Playing God. Give me a second. It is Profit and Loss. Okay. Alright. First comment. Oh, there's a lot more comments than I thought. Okay. So first comment is from Kyrie091, who says, profit and loss, more like vomit and toss. Okay, I don't feel good about that one. It's a gross pun. I'm sorry. Was this a Ferengi episode? I like those. I don't know why, but I always enjoy seeing more of the Ferengi politics and culture. Unless this isn't a Ferengi episode. Is it? I don't know. I can't decide if I like this episode or not, so I leave this question to Mark, since he is a professional. So Mark, I have a question. What does Kyrie-091 need with a profit and loss? What does God need with the starship? I don't know what you need with it. I don't know. It's not really a Ferengi episode. It's actually more of a Quark episode. I know the title sounds like a Ferengi episode, but yeah. And the title is very, very similar to another Ferengi episode that absolutely sucks. That is way worse than this one. Anyway, next comment is from Antarius, who says, I don't buy Quark being so madly in love. In this episode, he acts out of character most of the time. It certainly doesn't help that he has never talked about her before, nor will she ever be mentioned ever again. And I certainly didn't buy that she realized she was madly in love with Quark after she accidentally shot him. This scene was so cheesy. Odo, on the other side, is acting in character by ignoring orders because they don't fit his concept of justice. The theme, Garek is a mystery, is getting somewhat tiresome, like what are Odo's origins plot. Next time on DS9, Garek has to hire several employees because all the Ferengi are shopping at his place. Since the scenes involving Garek or Odo have some good moments, I will give this 5 out of 10. See, yeah, we disagree on Odo, but I knew some people would disagree with my stance on Odo. Garek, I don't think necessarily that whatever his origins is getting tired. They will eventually kind of drop it because they kind of sort of figure it out anyway, or enough of it where they're not really guessing all the time. But yeah, it never bothered me when I was watching the show originally for the first time. But I don't know. That's just me, but of course I totally agree about Quark being 100% out of character with this whole madly in love shtick. Yeah, doesn't work. Anyway, next comment is from Benjamin Mead, who says, I have never liked this episode. On my recent rewatch of the series in the first half of this year, I was excited to give this another try. After all, it has two of my favorite things about the show, Garek and Cardassian politics. But that doesn't save this episode. Still, it's terrible. Centering it around a Quark love story is dumb. Apparently, this is supposed to take place... apparently this is supposed to be a take on Casablanca, but Quark is no roguish romantic lead. I also listened to the Delta Flyers, and they get gushed over this episode. They might have been smoking Quark. Get it instead of crack, wink, wink. Oh, I didn't get it, so thanks for explaining. They do tend to overly stroke Armin's ego on the show. Anyway, this is a major dud, and Garek's turn at the end of the episode doesn't make sense. None of the characters act consistent with their characters. Thank you. This episode is so bad. Agreed. And I have been listening to the Delta Flyers as I've been going through every episode, so I've been listening to them for every episode so far that I'm up to. And, yeah, they were gushing over this episode and being way too positive on it. Totally agree. However, they have been negative on episodes before. They've even been negative on Quark episodes before. And one of them, I can't remember which, I did kind of disagree with and thought they were being too hard. Armin in particular can be quite critical. And a couple times I think he has these nitpicks that I don't really care about. But for this episode, they were like, oh, it's so good. No. No, it wasn't. They were surprised to hear that Ira Stephen Barrett didn't like this. And Armin Shimmerman's response to him saying, "Oh, I wish we didn't play Quark that way." His response was, "Well, you should have told me." He should have came down and say, "Hey, don't try to play him like Humphrey Bogart, like a hero." But yeah. Anyway, next comment is from Ricky. I never liked this episode. To me, it was an unbelievable character change for Quark, which is thankfully just for this one episode. But this relationship between the Cardassian professor and Quark was unbelievable. I just couldn't get invested in it, and they had no chemistry whatsoever. And plus, since when would Quark act like he is under a love potion when he is very sexist and very views females as sex objects? Also, the Garek aspect of it was okay but viable, especially that Garek just all of a sudden had a change of heart and allowed the Cardassians to leave. This is one of Garek's lesser episodes of the show, so my rating is a 3 out of 10. As per normal, totally agree with you. The thing with, I guess I didn't really talk about the Cardassian politics aspect at all. And the thing is, so this introduces the concept of the sort of dissident movement, which will actually will become a running thing through the series. And they just did it as a way so they could do Casablanca, basically. But at least they stick with it. But that aspect of it in this episode I didn't find particularly interesting, actually. And no, it's never touched on ever again. And I'm actually kind of okay with that because these characters had no chemistry. So they shouldn't have been. Anyway. Next comment is from Stephen Kennedy, who says, I enjoyed this episode, and yes, I do buy the lovable rascal would have a heart, even if he is fecked up. I buy Quark's relationship with Natima Lang, as I witness people who were arseholes who can be nice when they meet one. I worked with someone like that. He is still a prick, but now he is a lovable arsehole. At least Quark gave us a backstory how Mary Crosby and Quark were in love. The scene that Mary Crosby shot Armin Shimmerman was cheesy, but I have also witnessed something like that myself. Ooh. Some people seem to forgive others, and all they have to do is die. It's strange how people will forget all the hate, but it goes both ways. Fun fact, Mary Crosby is Denise Crosby's niece, even if Denise is 2 years older than Mary. Maybe they celebrated their first grandchild with a child of their own, like what my grandparents did. So my brother is older than our aunt. Oh, interesting. I can understand Antaria's comments about Garek. For me, the mystery was so interesting. I do wonder in the episode The Wire, which stories were true. I think they were all true, but he changed people's names to fit his amusement over Bashir to keep the mystery running, which ran for 7 years. So my rating is 7. Please, Odo, I'm begging you out of 10. My dear Stephen, they're all true. Even the lies, especially the lies. Sorry. Anyway, sorry, I just had to say that. But yeah, you're right. There were different aspects of the stories that had elements of truth, and that's never confirmed in canon. Andrew Robinson did write a non-canon novel to explain it, but I didn't like the explanation because it involved a romance with a woman, and I thought, no, that's not a good. They shouldn't do that for Garek. That doesn't really fit for him. And the truth is, I think if anyone did come up with a real explanation, there's no way it could be satisfying. There's just no way. But that is just my hunch. You're obviously way more positive on this episode than I am. So, good for you. Glad you enjoyed it. Anyway, next comment is from Norman Buckwald, who says, this episode never really worked for me. Yes, it's about the Cardassian dissident movement. Yes, it brings up Quark's former flame at a time when the writers focused on Quark's dating rather than simply, I don't know, harassing, looking at the other Prophet and episode, erg. And yes, it brings up before Garek took over as the favorite recurring character from DS9 from later this season, The Wire, and put Garek in an interesting dilemma where he hoped to return to Cardassia. And yet, I don't know, the students seem to be extras, and attention to the dissident movement maybe was too small. That and the chemistry of Quark and the female Cardassians, meh. To be honest, it's average. So 5, here's looking at you, Quarks, out of 10, and who knows, maybe it was trying to put in Casablanca's trope, maybe got in the way of this episode. In some ways, yes. In Garek's storyline, absolutely. They're trying, and the Cardassian dissident movement was just an excuse to input Casablanca. But in other ways, if they actually made Quark's character more like Rick, and he was more of a curmudgeon, it would have actually worked better. Ironically, as I said, it would have worked better. And the funny thing I'm willing to admit is that until I watched the episode last night, not the episode, the movie, Casablanca last night, I didn't know Here's Looking at You, Kid was from that movie. Now, I knew it was Humphrey Bogart. I knew it was a Humphrey Bogart quote, but I didn't know what movie it was from, and I didn't think it was Casablanca. So I was wrong. And don't call me stupid for not knowing that. I just didn't know that. Anyway, next comment is from Brandon Neil Howells, who says, Prophet and Lost. The problem with interspecies romance is I keep wondering how they fuck, and it really spoils the episode. I don't understand why Natima and her students are so important. It is vaguely hinted at, but never explained, so why should I care? Quark falling so madly in love is so out of character for a Ferengi and only surpassed in stupidity by behavior of Zek and Prophet motive. There are a couple of genuinely amusing lines, but that can't save this episode, which is a ripoff of Casablanca. There are no consequences after Odo frees prisoners, and Garek vaporizes the goal, both of which I find hard to believe. Yeah, that's an understatement. 4 Cardassian female professors with faces painted with honey out of 10. P.S. While I was watching this crap, I got the Pete Droog song, If You Don't Love Me, I'll Kill Myself, in my head, and now it won't fuck off. I know that song. I think I vaguely recall that. If you don't love, that's a really fucked up song. But I think it's kind of satire. I don't think he's being serious, but still, it's kind of still fucked up though. Well, no, I think he's making fun of people who would say that. But again, that's still kind of fucked up because people who say stuff like that have mental issues. And you shouldn't mock people with mental issues. But that's, again, going off on a totally other tangent. So I heard someone saying that the whole thing where Quark says, I painted your face with honey, they were suggesting that that was sexual innuendo and it was actually implying something else. But I don't think so. I think I trust in the purity of heart of the writers of this episode. I think it was honey. Otherwise, it gets kind of gross and I don't want to think about it, but I'm pretty sure that's what they meant. They meant actual honey, because it meant to be like the fun little. You always have in these romance movies where they do a fun little thing where they like fall in the water or they accidentally hit each other with something. You go, and it's like they laugh it off like it's funny. Like the Naked Gun was making fun of that when they had them walking on the beach holding hands and they like clothesline this other couple. So it's a kind of, that's what I take that story as. I take it at face value, as is supposed to be goofy, funny. Oh, this is a silly thing we did while we were in love, kind of thing. Anyway, I don't really think about how different aliens fuck, because we have no idea what their private parts are like. So you gotta assume that they're like humans, and so in which case that's how it's, there's no big mystery then. We do know Ferengis have an zone on their ears, but other than that, I don't think there'd be. I don't know. My mind just doesn't go there. I don't know. Anyway, I'm glad you brought up the thing about Odo and Garek facing no consequences. Like, seriously, what the fuck? Anyway, thank you, patrons, so very much for your comments. So my rating for profit and loss out of 10 is going to be a 3, very poor. Yes, I'm with Ricky on this one. I almost gave it a 4, and I think I gave it a 4. I was actually close to giving it a 5. But the more I thought about this episode, and the more I talked through it, I'm sorry, there's 2 good scenes. Can't save it. Yeah, you have a good scene. It saves it from getting a 2 or a 1, to be fair. Because the scene with Garek and Quark was magnificent, and the scene with Quark and Odo was also pretty good, and the scene with Cisco and Garek was also pretty good. But the other than that, the episode was kind of shit. I mean, as I said, like, they actually could have had a good episode if they made it more like a Casablanca, if they made this relationship more of a complex hate you, love you kind of relationship like Casablanca was. But by doing a simple I love you, I love you, I love you, fuck off, fuck off, fuck off, okay, I love you, I love you, I love you, okay, I love you, I love you, I love you, now I'm just gonna leave anyway. Like, that's shit. Casablanca didn't do that. And why? And it's totally out of character for Quark. 100% out of character for Quark. Maybe 50% out of character for Garek. And 25% out of character for Odo. This is out of character. This is an oddball episode that doesn't really fit that nicely into the canon of Deep Space Nine. And it's just because they wanted to do a Casablanca story, yet they failed and did a shitty job. And they couldn't even get that right. Come on, at least Siege of 558 actually did a good job copying Saving Private Ryan. And don't get me wrong, as much as I harp repeatedly on how much Siege of AR 558 rips off Saving Private Ryan, I actually like that episode. That's actually a good episode. It doesn't matter that it follows Saving Private Ryan like so goddamn closely. It's still a good episode. This one tried to copy Casablanca, and it sucks. It couldn't even do that right. So, no. 3 out of 10, and I actually think that is kind of generous of me. But yeah, 3 out of 10 for this episode. So, that is it for my review of Profit and Loss. So, if you enjoyed this video, please be sure to leave a like, subscribe, comment, that sort of thing. Help me out. If you want to help me out, support me in the algorithm, very much appreciate it. And if you really want to help me out, really would like this channel and want to support it and want to get more content, you can support me on Patreon, where I do Patreon-only series of videos where I revisit reviews I've done in the past, because, I'm going through every episode of Star Trek in order. However, I'm skipping the episodes that I've already done. And some of these episodes I've already done have reviews from like 8 years ago that were only 13 minutes long. And maybe some people are disappointed, like, because I go in depth on my newer reviews, like these hour-long videos, and they might be disappointed when they get to an episode I've already done and is only 10-15 minutes long. Well, if you want the longer, more in-depth version, go to Patreon. I do my revisited, and I go way more in depth on the episodes that I have already reviewed. But yeah, and many other rewards too. You can check out if you're interested, if you're so inclined. But as I said, if not, leaving a like, subscribing, all that also really, really helps me out. Other thing is that at the end of the month, I will be doing a live stream where I count down the top 10 best and the top 10 worst episodes of Star Trek The Next Generation as voted by you. So if you would like to participate in that, leave a comment in this video or any of my videos, doesn't matter which, I'll get it. And with your top 10 favorite episodes of Next Generation and your top 10 least favorite episodes of Next Generation, or worst, best, however you want to quantify it. And I will add it in, contabulate it, throw it all together, mush everyone's votes together, and at the end of the month, do a live stream where I'll show the results. So the more participants I get in that, the better. I had 16 participants, I believe, for the original series one. Hoping to get more for this one. So yeah, if you want to help out and contribute and see how you influence the overall top 10, yeah, that would be great also. Alright, so let's see what's coming up next on the old channel here. Where am I at? Okay, so Wednesday will be my review for Journey's End. Thursday will be my review for Blood Oath. Saturday will be my review for Firstborn. And then on Monday, I'll be over on Patreon doing one of those Patreon exclusive videos revisiting my review for the Maquis Parts 1 and 2. So that's what's coming up next on my channel. Be sure to check it out as I continue to cover Star Trek DS9 and Star Trek Next Generation and many other shows as well. So be sure to subscribe so you can keep up with all of that. And thanks a lot for watching.